Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. It is such a pleasure to be back at the African Governance Institute for Development. This is the first edition of our webinar for the month of August, and I'm extremely delighted to have two speakers that will be joining. We have one online now, and we plan to talk about youth participation in political parties. And it promises to be a really interesting conversation. So thank you everyone joining. John Afolabi, Caris Nicholas, Adelayo Oluwaseun, Vasti Bala, Jonah, thank you. You can just drop it in the chat box where you're calling or where you're logging in from. We will certainly be talking a lot about political parties, and I'm quite excited to have two fantastic speakers join us for the webinar. We have a very good big brother and friend that is a Nigerian at heart and a Nigerian dual national. I'm sure he will tell us a little bit more about himself. But probably more importantly, why he's on the call tonight is because he's also a member in the political parties in the United Kingdom. I'll let him do all the introduction, and he's also, an elected member. So, without further ado, I would allow you the floor to Mr. Oloko, Councillor Oloko, to introduce himself.
Good evening, and thank you, Seyi. I was going to say Honorable Seyi, but I thought maybe not. But I've said it anyway, so there you go. So good evening, everyone. Thank you again for deeming it fit to involve me in a discussion around the youth. So I kind of feel very young today. That's why I put on my T-shirt as well to look the part rather than a suit. But yes, as I said, my name is Biyi Oloko. I am indeed a councillor in the UK, a councillor of the Conservative Party in a constituency called Reading West and Mid Berkshire, which is at the heart of those who are familiar with this part of the world. It's at the heart of the county called Berkshire, which is about 20 minutes from Heathrow, depending how you travel. So in my party, which is a Conservative Party and a constituency, I also hold the office of the Deputy Chairman of Political, which means I am responsible for the political strategy, machinations, and all the stuff around that in my area. That's a recent occurrence. And in the course of our discussion this evening, I'll probably shed a bit more light on why that has happened. Because one thing that I would advise is that you cannot change a system by being outside of it. You have to get into it and you have to play your part to be able to change that system. It's like playing football from the sideline. You will never score a goal. You will always think you can score, but you will never score. And you'll never be able to defend that attack, even though you think that the people on the field didn't get it right. But until you get in there and you run for 2 minutes and you think, how do they do this for 90 minutes? And then you become better informed. So I'll leave it like that for now. And thank you very much, Seyi, for inviting me back again. So I must have done something good.
well, it's good to have you back, and we particularly wanted to bring you on because during our last conversation we spoke a lot about political parties, and rightly so, because every time we talk about governance, it really stems from the political parties. I mean, yes, in some nations they have independent candidature, but in most places, most democracies, they run with political parties. And so we felt it was extremely important based on what we had heard from many young people. And we actually have a vox pop on the website or on our social media platforms where we went out to the streets and we asked a lot of young people, whether they would even think of joining political parties or politics. So the fact is that political parties is where the whole governance matrix starts from. And today we want to talk about youth participation and really the role the youth must also play in ensuring that the reforms that the parties should have must occur. Now, I guess you've given us your opening words, and we'll just jump straight into it once Michael Shitu, who would be our second panelist, comes online. Would allow him introduce himself and take on the questions as well. So, Mr. Oloko, let's go straight into it. Young people generally have found it difficult. And the stats show that it's not just in Africa, but we're talking about Africa here. They've struggled, they found it difficult to get into governance. And this has been linked to the existing party structures, or if you like, the what you call the old boys club, as some people call it, whereby they shut the door to young people, to women, and they kind of keep having the same type of people show up every time you want to get candidates for positions. In fact, according to the African Growth Initiative in 2019, it reported that only 14% of sub-Saharan African parliamentarians are under the age of 40. And I'm sure this is an abnormality when you consider that 70% of the population in Africa are under 30. So if you're having just less than 14% being represented, representing over 70% of the population, something isn't working. So 2 questions, Mr. Oloko, which I would like you to kick us off with. The first is, how are we going to increase youth participation, in your opinion? And then the second thing is, what role do you advise young people like myself to play in terms of getting, stronger, participation in political parties? And I want you to use your experience obviously in the UK to juxtapose what we have here.
Okay, thanks again, Seyi. As you know, I did spend some time as an appointee in Nigeria, so I've also had and have a perspective of political parties in Nigeria as well. But one thing which I would say, and I did say it before, is that you can't change a system from outside of it. So that mindset needs to change. The mindset has to be a mindset of, well, if we're going to change this, we have to be a part of it because we have to get in. But we also need to understand the genesis of political parties. I'm not a strong historian, but I believe this democratic political party structure is something that we inherited as part of our colonial past. So one of the things I therefore want to say, because when you talk about you need to increase youth participation, you first need to understand that political parties are membership clubs. You have to be a member of the party to belong. So if you're not a member of the party, you don't belong in the party. So if you understand that it's a club, and I use that word loosely, but I also use it purposefully, is that you have to be part of the club to be able to influence it. You can imagine, let's take Nigeria as an example for those who know about, let's use Lagos as a Ikoyi club. If you're not a member of Ikoyi club, you can't become a leadership of Ikoyi club. So, and if you want to change the rules or what you perceive to be the issues there, you first have to get in. So my advice to any youth is that you can't make a difference being on the outside. That will not work. You have to be on the inside, number one. And then number two is that the role that you need to play will be determined by what you see or do on the inside. So let me use the example of why I'm now a DCP in my area. I was very new to the political party structure here in the UK. So, and I and then I realized that the party structure here is very fundamental, and therefore, we saw some things and we experienced some things which we didn't like. So we felt if we're going to change it, we have to first become officers of the association, because it's only then that you can change it. And then we decided and put all the work into it to ensure that we were selected and elected to be officers. So now that we are now officers of my party, we therefore now are in a position to make a difference. So if I play that alongside what you just asked in terms of role for young people, the role is that get in, you need to understudy the process. The political party structure is what it is, and it is going to remain so until people get involved and decide to change it. Being outside the system doesn't work. And we all complain, and I can accept it about what political politics is a dirty business, is this, is that. But if you're not in a political party, you can't be part of government. Even if as an independent, you still will struggle to win an effective seat in government. In a parliamentary structure, you might get a seat, but you'll not be effective in government. So your political party gives you a gateway to become effective in government, to be able to influence things and make a difference. The question, therefore, is when you get there, what are you going to do? The political party that we have is just a structure. Why it doesn't work is because of the people inside. So the people who are outside and think that they want to make a difference need to get inside and stay focused on why they want to get in there to change it. And I think at some point when we take questions and answers, I'll be able to answer that question in more detail. So that's kind of my perspective. And that's why you see this abnormally in the numbers, where you have 70% of the population participating in only 14% of what impacts their lives. That in itself says that they need to wake up and get involved. There's just no other way. I don't know how else to express it, in that they just need to get involved. It's not that it's an easy path, but get involved. And then when you have numbers, then you can begin to make an impact. We ensured that we had numbers when we got to the selection time, and that's why we were able to take control of the party. You also have to be strategic about this.
Wow. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Oloko. Mr. Oloko has re-emphasized the need for us to just, the loads of young people say, yes, we want to join politics, but they won't give us, they won't open the door for us, they won't help us. And I think, that in itself shows the mindset of many of us young people, expecting the door to be open for us, expecting things to be made easy for us, expecting, if you like, people to welcome and say, welcome, you can come into the power game. But like you have said, it's a membership club. You have to get in. Until you get in, you cannot change the process. And when you do get in, understand it's a numbers game. You have to be strategic. Even if you say it's dirty, when you guys get in there in your numbers, you can start to clean things up and get the reform. And I saw someone in the chat room talk about do we join parties or do we create parties? And I'll take that question a little later, because I also get a lot of that. Those parties are so corrupt. I think we should start our own party. That's what we should do. And then obviously, whilst you have the freedom of association, there are many other things one should consider. Now, at this point, I really want to introduce our second panelists. Another brother and friend of mine, Michael Situ, that is from the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. And he is, as you can see, also a young man. And we certainly would like for him to introduce himself, just maybe give us, some opening remarks, and then I'll ease you into the questions. We'll continue this for another 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll take questions from the audience. All right, over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Seyi. It's a pleasure to join the forum discussion here today, and it's really good to catch the tail end of Councillor Biyi's contribution, and what he said is what I stand on and build from there. So just to tell you a little bit about myself and kind of just tell you a bit of my journey, and obviously we can take further questions from there. So I was born in Nigeria. I grew up till I was 12 years old, did up to my GSS1 there. As with growing up in Nigeria, it came with the beauty of kind of discipline, culture, and the community spirit in which you get in an African setting in itself. But what was very clear, even at such a young age in Nigeria, is that opportunities were limited even then, and I can appreciate that opportunities are even more limited at this particular point in time. I was very fortunate enough that my parents were already in the UK and decided that my older sister and I would join them in '97. And my journey since then, it's pretty much probably similar to those migrants who have come into the UK trying to kind of strive ahead and trying to make best of the new environment in which they found themselves. When I arrived in the UK as a 12-year-old boy, it wasn't plain sailing, very, very challenging. There were significant cultural differences, both in terms of how I spoke, in terms of cultural norms, and it was quite difficult and challenging to kind of assimilate. But what made it particularly even more difficult is the state of schools around my area when I came over in 1997. So I resided in Peckham, and I still reside in the Southwark area. And schools then were at the bottom quartile of schools across the country. Inner London schools were failing across the area. And for a lot of young people, literally studying in inner London area for secondary school was more like setting you up to fail. And for me, it got me quite eyes open pretty much early on in terms of why do I deserve that? Why do I deserve an education which was substandard when I know that there were different parts of the country where actually you had 5 times better chances than me just because of the school you went to and the area in which you grew up in itself. And that got me thinking. But that was also helped by the fact that I was fortunate to have a father who was involved within the community then back in the 90s and into the noughties. And blessed his memory, he's passed away now, but he introduced me, as he introduced all my other siblings, to community life. And through that, over the years, I grew an interest in taking an interest in how my area developed, in seeing things that isn't good enough and thinking about how I can be part of the solution, how I would make sure that I wasn't just moaning about it. And it is important to moan. If you see something that isn't good, that is bad, it's important to speak out. But it's also important to do more than that and think about how you can be part of the solution there. And because I had grown up in a family where my father had been involved through the political system, I'd had the first hand view of the impact of having direct involvement in the political system. And so that when I was literally kind of old enough to join the political party, I joined, followed my dad's footstep and joined the Labour Party and started getting involved in the youth movement itself. And for me, it was throwing me out of my comfort zone. I may be speaking now and you kind of think, oh, I must be naturally gifted at speaking. Actually, this is a skills that I've had to learn over the years. I consider myself as quite introvert privately, but I've learned that actually in order to achieve something in politics, you've got to learn how to put forward your thoughts, your ideas, and also build support around it itself. So that at quite an early age, I got involved in the youth movement, and that gave me the breathing space to kind of hone my own skills, to develop at the rate in which I wanted to develop without too much pressure. And I remember sitting through countless of meetings without saying anything. And those who knew me then will think maybe I was too timid. I wouldn't want to say anything. But for me, that was the person I was. I studied the environment and I listened before I started to take step and putting myself up for position, and then trying to take further responsibility within the party and in turn within the local community itself. And that was what then led me to becoming councillor in 2010 and then further rose within the council, both as cabinet member and more lately as the mayor of the London Borough of Southwark itself. It has been a privilege for me to serve till date, but I know that however challenging politics is, it is still the direct way of changing lives for not just myself, but for those around me. And it's incredibly important that not just myself, but my friends, my family, my neighbors, those living in my community and the wider country allows that we create an environment where everybody feel that they have the best opportunity to thrive and are supported to doing so. So I'll probably leave it at there, and I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael, for sharing, so eloquently your journey. Read to, recap the fact that you said politics is the way to bring change. And I think that's what we've been, about at the AGID, continuously sharing knowledge and helping people recognize that they have a part to play. And, if you feel so called, certainly join politics. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact you said you became a councillor in 2010. That's 14 years ago. And I mean, looking at you, I know, I could approximate what your current age is. So I want you to quickly speak to us about the common challenges that young people that want to join politics, what challenges they face. And I would love for you to tell us your story. What are the sort of challenges or barriers to entry that young people that want to join this membership club that is full of the older generation, the older audience, as it were? What are the challenges that they face, and how did you overcome those challenges? So well, you could just tell us the challenges, and then obviously we'll love to hear. 2010 is 14 years ago. I bet you were still in your 20s. How did you overcome these challenges? Political parties are complex. They have internal politics. They have all of these things going on. But you were able to go in 14 years ago, and you've remained steadfast right up till last year, going into this year, where you were mayor of the Southwark Borough Council in London.
That's a very important question. And it's not just young people I might add that face challenges, but for young people, it's probably more exacerbated. And the challenges run along the lines of the typical questions I get asked. The kind of things that people tell me when I say, well, why not get involved? I think you'll be brilliant. Just start and do something. People tell me, well, I don't know anything about it. I'm not that political. Some people say, I haven't got the time or resources for it. And some even say it's too corrupt. It's not my field that I don't want to get into the murky world of it. But for me, the answers I generally say to that is, when people say, I don't know anything about it, I say, I get you. I understand that. As with anything you start with, you tend to not know much about it, but you learn along the way. You learn by both reading up on the area, but also you learn by watching others itself. And that's why I suggested that sometimes just kind of observing your area for a while before you take steps is very important. So that I will say, if people say, I don't know anything about it, I would say, let that not be a barrier. You can certainly learn through time. When people say to me, I'm not a political person, and sometimes people relate that to perhaps a lack of particular skills. As I've mentioned earlier on, some people think that you need to be a polished speaker overnight. The reality is almost 90% of those who are in politics own the skills through time. Yes, there are gifted, eloquent speakers, but for even some of them, they get better through time. You can be better at it. But even politics has room for different kind of skills. There are some politicians that you will call a doer, that what they do is you actually don't see them spending too much time telling you about what they do. They just get on with it, and they let their kind of their output, their outcome, demonstrate what they're about itself. There are some politicians that they spend quite a lot of time telling you what they're doing than perhaps what they are actually doing itself, and that may well be a different skills itself. So the politics itself will call for different skills in different arena at different times itself. So that for me, I would always say, don't worry too much at the moment if you think that perhaps you don't have the ready-made skills. And sometimes I can appreciate that politics can be an expensive business. What I mean by that is that at the start of it, for you to attend a meeting, you're probably paying your own bus fare, or you're probably kind of doing it within your own time that you would have been going to work, or you would have been doing other things itself. But actually, you can do that in stages. You can start initially with in a way which is manageable, and if you are struggling, you can ask for support. What people would not want to be the case is, say, if a young person come to me and say, Michael, I really want to attend this meeting, but I don't have a bus fare to attend. I'm telling you, I would make sure that the provision is there to allow them to attend on a regular basis itself. If there is the will and the huge passion shown, there would be support from other people. Maybe not everybody. There will be support from other people who are willing to get you there in that way. And I also say that there are different ways to contribute. Sometimes just contributing your time instead of any monetary contribution can go a long way. And when sometimes people tell me that it's too corrupt or anything, I would say in anything good that is well worth having, there will be people who have ulterior motive. The important thing is that the good people outnumber those people with ulterior motive. And the more of you, the more of me, the more of Councillor Biyi, the more of Seyi, the more of every one of us who are thinking alike, who are thinking that we need to change the area around us, the more of us on the table, the more we can ensure that the way in which politics operate at the basic level and also at the more national level is changed in the appropriate way.
Thank you, Michael. You know what is what I really want to put a spotlight on is the fact that these are the same pardon the use of the word excuses people have in Nigeria, and I bet in Cameroon and all the parts of the world. It's always the same thing. It's too dirty. I don't want to tarnish my image. I don't have the resources. These are the same things, but your convictions must always be greater than these limitations and these fears. Michael, I will still go back to that question, and I want you to talk maybe a little bit more about the system barriers. But before I do that, I would go to Mr. Oloko, Councillor Oloko. I beg your pardon. But I want Michael to certainly think about the structure of the party in itself. Yes, we do have personal barriers that we create ourselves, but then outside ourselves, there are some systems or structures within the party that actually seem to be skewed to favor those that are not young, if you like, the regular faces. So it'll be interesting for you to help us, interrogate that and tell us how we can overcome that. But Mr. Oloko, you mentioned, and I know because we were once colleagues, that you've also worked in the Nigerian government, and you've related with political parties here in Nigeria. You're a member over there in the UK. What should be political parties in Nigeria and in Africa? What should we be learning? What should we be imbibing? Having been through this system, and this is the purpose of having diaspora community join us in the African Governance Institute for Development, so that much more than just what we're learning from ourselves in Africa, those in diaspora can also contribute to the conversation. So what should political parties in Africa be learning or imbibing to make them more inclusive, to make them more effective, to make them more accessible? Because clearly it does look like the political parties over there are better structured and seem to have systems and strong institutions, while over here some of our parties are controlled by people rather than systems and structures. So what do we learn and how do we improve?
Well, thank you very much for that. And I just want to add, I loved listening to Councillor Situ there, and I know he's just slightly younger than myself, us being both, talking about youth participation, so we're not that far apart in age. So and I'm really impressed in what he's done and his outlook. And what I would say to the youth is that look at Councillor Michael Shitu. You understudy his story and learn from it. Now, to come back to what you're saying about the differences, like you're trying to outline, I don't think we're comparing like with like.
Hmm.
I think that, and I was quickly trying to search for the numbers, but I couldn't get it. The democracy or the political party structure in the UK is a lot older and more mature than what we have in Nigeria. And I think in the early days, it probably had its own nuances, issues, and challenges. But
Councillor Oloko, sorry to cut in. No, we can't compare them, but we need to learn from them.
yes,
So,
yes, yeah, so yeah, but the first thing is, yeah, you can't, you have to learn from them, but you're learning from something that, it's like you're here and you're looking at, something that's 1,000 miles away and you want to learn from it. You've got to take it step by step and hopefully see how you can be guided along the way. But the key word, which my Councillor Michael Shitu talked about, which I hope people grasped, and he used the example of somebody who wanted to attend the meeting but didn't have money for the bus fare. So think about that. Bus fare. Now, then think about the enabling, think about the environment in which they're operating, where the challenge that they face is a bus fare. And bring that to Nigeria and imagine a similar individual. His challenge is going to be more than a bus fare. There are many other battles that individual needs to grapple with before they can even think about getting onto the bus to get to where they want to go to. Now, the fundamental word, and I circled it here, is serve. The political party, involvement in the political party here is born out of a desire to serve. You either have it or you don't. That is why somebody can decide that, I don't have enough money for a bus fare, but I still want to go somewhere. That's been driven by passion. Now, when you now come to where we are, when you look about what happens in political parties, and I know we can let's take it from the top. If you want to become if you want to aspire for political office in Nigeria, your key thing is to be able to afford to buy the form. You join the party, but you have to be able to buy the form before you can, put yourself forward. And once you've been able to buy the form, you fill the form and you're ready to go. Let me talk about the Conservative Party and the process to become an MP. So even though you've joined the party, you go through a screening process before you can become eligible as a candidate. Being eligible as a candidate does not guarantee that you'll be selected. You do have to pay some money for you to go through that process, and it's a token amount, but it's still a few £100, which somebody needs to find if they want to aspire for office. If you want to aspire for office, however, not everyone is eligible or capable of aspiring for office. I quickly checked some data. There are 650 or so MPs, and there are about 17,000 councillors in a population of about 60 something million. So that tells you that there's a pyramid structure. However, at the base of that is the political party, the membership. And that's where the influence, the change, and participation comes from. So some people are going to be involved in the political parties so they can influence the occurrences in government and not necessarily expect to aspire to a higher office. But they are ready to serve. They will attend meetings that are being held at their own costs. They are not looking for anything. They don't have to be bossed anywhere. They're not giving any money to lead a delegation anywhere. Things like that don't happen here. So when you talk about learning, you have to imbibe that culture of service. So people need to understand that when I go into politics, I'm going to serve. What is happening is that people are not going into politics necessarily to serve. And I say that deliberately, right? People have different objectives. You can only measure people by what their objectives are, and you can only ask in each individual what their objective is for going into politics. So the examples that you want to talk about in terms of learnings is that the youth, we the youth need to focus on the word service. A counselor in the UK, right? And you can go and check it. In my area, it's public information. It's £753 a year, a month, which is about £8,000 a year. That is what a counselor's allowance is in the UK, and it's a part-time role. Now, I would leave everyone to wonder, if that was in Nigeria, what would happen? That certainly cannot be. So there has to be a change in why people go in to these parties. And that change can only come from the desire of the individual. So what I'm hoping, at least from this session, is that us youth will take into mind that if I'm going into this, I am going to serve. I'm not going to be colored by what I see and the issues I face and the numbers that have been, pushed about or been reported as salaries and things and perks and enumeration, that remuneration that people are getting. But I am going in there to serve. Most people you see in government and in governance, and you can look at Councillor Michael Situ as a classic example, you know, is that he had a desire to serve, to make a difference. Those two things must be, it's almost like it must be imbibed into your spirit, that the desire to serve and that itchiness to make a difference. And for me, it is ensuring, therefore, that when you get in, I can see somebody put there about numbers. Make sure that there are more people who, like yourselves, who share passions. You can be in different parties. That doesn't matter. But the important thing is that we want to make things better so that we can get to a point where the issue for an individual, a youth in Nigeria, is about how much about my bus fare to get to a meeting, not what I'm going to get when I get to that meeting. It's a big difference. I want to go to that meeting because I want to be part of the story. I'm not going to that meeting because we're sharing. And that is a big difference. And I think that is what has to culturally change, is that people, and it's not even just the youth, because it cuts right across the spectrum of age, going into politics and government. Politics is your pathway into government. Whether you choose to be in the existing parties or you want to set up your own party, the ethos and the desire and the spirit has got to be the same. You want to go in, you want to change, and that's got to be the difference. The difference here and the learnings is that when I'm going in here, I'm going in to serve, and I'm not expecting much back in terms of cash, in terms of money, but I'm going in there because I want to make a difference and I want to influence. As local councillors, you want to be influence what is happening in your locality. As an MP, you want to influence what's happening nationally and internationally, and become part of the change story. So it's I would just leave it to say that there are different roles that we can play in politics, in governance. There's a support role and there's a front role. There's the party structure. Here, the party structure begets the councillor, begets the MP. So if you get it right, you can influence who becomes an MP, you can influence who becomes a councillor, and you can ensure that those values that are enshrined in the political parties, which therefore drives what happens locally and nationally, are being driven through the individuals who get selected. Go back to something I said earlier about the process for selecting candidates. You become eligible as a candidate, but it doesn't mean that you'll get a seat. But you would have been screened and assessed to ensure that you have the skills and the capability, and I'm sure it's the same in Labour Party as well, to become a leader or to become part of the system. Now, that's one of the things that needs to happen. There needs to be a screening of the candidates. It's not just because you can afford to buy the form that therefore qualifies you to become a governor or whatever, whichever office you aspire for. The party must ensure that individuals are, we actually spend 2 days. Some people spend a year
Councillor
to become
Oloko,
a member.
You
becoming,
know
yes.
that we actually screen candidates here too. It's just that everybody passes the screening. Nobody fails
No,
the screening.
no, we don't screen.
We actually, because I remember that when the governor, when we were going for late boss's second term,
Screening.
he was screened. He went for screening. So the political parties set up screening committees for the purpose of screening candidates. But everybody most times passes those screening, which begs the question: what are they really screening if everybody is going to pass the screening?
Yeah.
Well,
Recall what I said. Sorry, recall something that I said about what is the objective, what is the motive.
Yes.
Right? Am I going in there because I want to serve? Or am I going? So if I'm going for a meeting, why am I going to that meeting? Am I going to meeting because the state appointees or the government appointees are going to be there and they would have come there with something for the boys? Or I'm going in there because I want to influence what is happening in government, and that's the difference.
And that's
what drives the screening.
I think what you're saying absolutely makes sense, Councillor Oloko, because if the highlight is service, then you don't have to block the younger ones coming into the party. You don't have to restrict those wanting to add value or wanting to serve with you. If the goal, if the objective is indeed service, then hey, the more the merrier. I don't need to block you from coming in to serve. And I think another point that is important to emphasize is you are saying, can we focus not just on the office you want to go into, but really on who you are or what you want to offer, which is service. Fantastic. All right. I want to open the lines for participants to start asking questions. But before they do, I don't know if Michael, if first of all you want to touch on this particular topic, which is what have you seen as the main differences between the Labour Party that you're a member of and maybe what you have seen in political parties in Nigeria, in Africa, and what are the lessons that you feel we can imbibe before then going back to the earlier question I asked you about systemic barriers rather than just the personal barriers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Seyi. I think that question is really important, and where Councillor Biyi left off is where I will pick up itself. It's absolutely right. I think it's got to be kind of service has got to be at the pinpoint of it. You've got to have a heart of service. It's got to be the reason you want to go into it, and you've got to remind yourself of that even when the going gets tough. But the reality is, and which every politician would tell you, that whilst it may be more dire in Nigeria, it is still to some extent the case in UK and probably most political system across, that it does cost a bit, or it does cost money or some sort of expenses in order to be involved or to actively engage in that respect. So that even if you're not actually paying direct money, the time you're spending, which instead of you spending it at work or doing something else in order to progress kind of your political involvement, would be at the expense of your career itself. So I take myself an example. So I work in my other role as a lawyer. Now, most of my kind of living expenses, I would say it's probably paid by my legal work. And it's important for me to carry on practicing law, not just because I enjoy it, but because it also kind of pay for my living expenses in a way in which politics isn't able to do that, living in a central London borough itself. And for me, there's always a challenge for me about what the balance of my time is in terms of what I put into politics and what I do in terms of my legal work itself. And that plays itself into the barriers of politics here, which I think is probably to some extent exacerbated in Nigeria. So the three kind of areas which I would suggest are kind of key barriers here is in an essence, political parties are a group whereby people of like-minded people come together to try to realize their political vision. itself. That's why you form a political party or you join a political party. You've concluded that it's better for you to be part of a group to realize your aim than going it alone. Now, each group will have a structure itself, and the structure is often a balance between the cost of running the structure and increasing participation within the structure itself. And I know genuinely well that my colleagues within the Labour Party want the structure of the Labour Party to be the best of the best in a way which encourages as much wider participations as possible. But it's also recognized that that increases the cost itself. So some of the things I would like more is more youth forums at every single level of the party, resources devoted to those youth forums itself, where the party kind of puts more resources into youth forums to support young people to organize themselves. We do some, but we probably could do more of that. I think there are also different levels of the party where there could be more specific roles reserved for young people. And again, political parties could do that more. In Nigeria, it could be more than is done in itself. So I think there are ways in which participation could be increased where the structure at the moment isn't enough to engage young people. So I think the second issue is that we've got to also recognize that politics, as I said, is about alliances and allegiance, and the positions within the structure is also based on that. So politics within politics. And when you get involved in politics, you will find out pretty quickly that in order for you to progress, you also have to form alliances with people that are like-minded to you within your political parties. So the political parties are a broad church. I'm sure Councillor Biyi will agree with me that within the Conservative Party, there is the left of the spectrum, there's the middle, there's the right. In the Labour Party as well, likewise there are. And where you position yourself can determine whether you're left in the oblivion or whether you actually have a chance to become the mayor of Southwark itself. And it's incredibly important that you build those allegiances. But the problem is for young people, they tend to have not spent long-term in politics because they're younger itself. They've joined more recently and they haven't had time to cultivate that allegiances itself. And because they are very passionate, young people are very raw, they come in with passion, they want something done yesterday. It's easy to get frustrated that actually you feel that your ideas are not valued. People are just doing whatever they like anyway itself. And as I said, I went through years where I thought, actually, this is all sewn up already. Decisions have been made. You're just making up the numbers itself. But that is politics to some extent. But it's also part of politics that you bide your time, you work hard, you build allegiance, you take your time to persuade your colleague why your position is right. You take your time to persuade your colleague why in Southwark it's important to give scholarship to students. It's important for us to have free school meals. You take your time to explain why it's important for us to build new council homes. You take your time to say why it's important to support businesses. And it takes time. But when you get it right, it becomes something which you feel so proud of, and you can see the impact of your work. So, and this is where resilience comes in as a young person. And I appreciate that it can be very frustrating. The last point I would mention is in terms of actually the natural kind of barriers in kind of political party, including the Labour Party, is sometimes the tug of war between kind of young people's new perspective and those who have been involved in the system. They're kind of already crystallized. I've seen it all before. We've gone through this so many tried and tested route. Why should we go along that again? I remember when I became a councillor in 2010 and kind of my view about what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. If you ask me the same questions now, what are my priorities and how I think it needs to be done, they are different. But they're different because of my experience about how you get things done. And so that a young person who hasn't got that experience itself, because they haven't spent that many years within the structure itself, they can be very frustrated and they can give up. So that I think those are intrinsic kind of barriers I would suggest for youth kind of participation, for youth lasting longer within the political party system, and for young people thriving within the system. But as with all things in life, there are barriers. I always say to people, life is like an 110 meters hurdles race. There are a lot of barriers along the way, but you can hurdle over them with care, with skills, and with resilience. You can hurdle over each of them. And if you get tripped over, pick up yourself up again and go over again. And it may well be that you don't become the prime minister or the president of Nigeria, but by the end of the race, you would have made a meaningful contribution to your society, to the people around you, and to yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Michael Situ. You know, I'm so pleased both of you have spoken, you know, very broadly about your experiences, both from the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And it does sound like what we face in Nigeria, so that people can come to terms with the fact that politics is local, but the challenges are similar. You face these similar personal challenges, you face systemic challenges, you face these challenges, and the principles of success, being able to, you know, fail and get back up and do all of these things Councillor Situ and Councillor Oloko have spoken to us about are extremely important. Now, we have a few questions, and I would prompt for them to start coming up. I just want to plead with our two councillors to, as the questions do come up, just you could take a stab at them each, and just maybe with, you know, 2-3 minutes, just take it. And if one person wants to take it, you know, we're fine with that. So we'll just put the questions up so that we can get as many questions as possible. One question I will certainly ask before we leave is the ideology question, because, you know, in Nigeria and maybe in other parts of Africa, oh, these political parties don't have any ideologies. They're just, you know, just group of people wanting to win elections and all of that. And it will be interesting to actually, you know, hear your thoughts on that. But what Michael has just clearly shown us is that you play politics even within the political parties. The political parties are learning platforms for the politics you want to play outside. The ability to build alliances, the ability to form allegiances, the ability to persuade and lobby others to be able to get your views across. It's what happens within parties, but it's a testing ground for what you want to do when you get into office. So I will hold now. I would hand over to our moderator to just put up the questions. Like I said, either one of you can take a stab at it. Well, because I see quite a number of them, we'll just try and keep them as brief as we can so we can get as many over the line as possible. So, all right, let's take it from here.
Are we supposed to read an answer, or how does it?
Okay. Well, I was. How do you give hope to youths who have given up on the ballot box, an election management body, due to the indiscriminate election malpractices? This is Valerie Che, I believe, from Cameroon. I'm not sure if I'm correct. I think from Cameroon. So how do you give hope? It's a question of hope. How do you give hope to young people that do not believe in politics generally, in the ballot, in the elections? Just how do you give hope?
I think, Seyi, I think the important thing, it's a very good question by Valerie. The important thing is to explain the connection between how the experience in their life and political decisions itself. So the reality is, as you grow older, you will start to realize that actually there are other people basically making decisions that is affecting your life more than you yourself. And the more you draw that analogy and you present a clear pathway for how people can get involved, I do believe that people will start to see that in that regards. People yearn for change. People want change. People just want to see that actually they can be part of that change, and that change can come to be itself. And I think forums like this, where actually we are talking about it from different perspectives, and people are able to listen and ask us questions, are part of the picture itself. I think for those who are kind of role models, I think it's important that they continue to speak to young people at every single forum to explain their own journey pathway and how their decisions now is impacting on and changing societies around them.
Yeah, and I think I just added very little to that, and you're absolutely right. The role of the role model is very critical because people like to see those who have gone ahead of them and how they handle that. So there's a need, Valerie, for that to happen. And Councillor Situ talked about, used a particular word which I like very much, which is resilience. Resilience means that you keep coming back and keep coming back until you get a resolution to what you want, and that's got to be an aspect of it. You need to be resilient from your side, but from the other side, if you like, there needs to be continuous dialogue, continuous discussion, continuous aspirations. And I can tell you, on this side of the divide, nobody got to the offices that they are sitting in now, so to speak, by they didn't just walk into it. They also went through various challenges. I shared at the early part of this session about how I ended up becoming a DCP. It's because I saw what I didn't like, and we took our time to prepare, to strategize, and to ensure that we actually got into the system to the point that we're actually able to be part of the change. So like I said earlier, there's also a need to be strategic, and you must also have that fire in you, which is where the resilience comes in. Because anywhere you go in the world, you are going to face different types of challenges, whether it is ballot box or management. Different countries have different perspectives, and you should not give up. Continue to be driven by your desire to make a difference, and look for like-minded people. And we talked about being part of a group, being part of a club, the alliances that need to be formed. I'd like to see how you progress in your workplace if you don't form alliances. Political parties is just the way that you form your alliances for you to get into government, so you can actually shape what is happening within your country or your locality.
I think it's important to always talk about mindsets of the young people, of we young people, the youth. Every time I go to different fora, I get asked these questions: why are they not giving us power? Why are they not giving us? The truth is, people don't give these things away. People take them, and they take them by being resilient. They take them by being intentional, by being strategic,
Yep.
by really saying, look, enough is enough. No, you're not more Nigerian or Cameroonian or anything than I am. In fact, I have a larger, if you like, stake in this matter because I have longer years to go. So I need to decide now that what happens to me, my children, and generations unborn, I want to play a part. And it's that
Absolutely.
level of intentionality and determination that we young people need, and not expect it's going to be given to us. It's not about violence or revolution or anything like that. It's just about being strategic and intentional to really play our part. All right, we'll take the next question.
As somebody said, power is not served a la carte.
It's not served a la carte. It's not served a la carte. All right, so the next question. This is to Councillor Oloko.
How can political parties address the issues of accessibility and inclusivity? I think we've talked a bit about that. And Councillor Situ talked about, youth forum and interactive discussions, ensuring that certain roles are left for the youth to be involved in. There has to be an intention within the party to ensure that we bring through the youth, and the youth are the future of the party. So it has to be built into the structure. So political parties need to ensure that that structure is built in terms of roles, in terms of responsibilities, even in terms of communication.
Oloko, sorry to interrupt you, but is the old order going to make that happen, or is the young people that have to go in and demand for it to happen? The old guard, are they going to?
It's a bit of both. So there are those. So look, change is the only thing that's constant, and people will resist change if they can get away with it. but you have to get in there. And that's what we've been talking about. You must get involved. And getting involved, therefore, means that you're going to hit resistance. We've talked about resilience. And therefore, you got to push. Now, and you also have to make a case. It's not about violently getting in there. I'm not sure, no one's advocating violence here. It's about being strategic about how you go in. In this day and age, communication is quite key. And so digital communication seems to be, par for the course, really. And those are areas where the youth are stronger. So whilst the old guard are being old guarded, the youth can come in with digital marketing and somebody says something and the whole world sees it. So they become guarded about what they say. And they know that they need to defer to the youth in terms of what happens. So I think it's a bit of both, right? There's the youth need to push, and the old guard, I wouldn't even want to use the word old guard. I mean, there might be some elements of that. But I think there's also got to be a need to pull through. And that has to be inculcated into the political parties. And it is the people who come into those parties that would ensure that these things happen.
All right. Next question, please. All right. So we have godfatherism is rarely affecting politics, even at party level, leading to unequal opportunity for all. How can this be tackled? So I don't know, Councillor Oloko, you can have a quick stab, and then we'll let Michael as well have a quick stab. So you're both in different parties anyways. Good to hear.
Well, I mean, I would not want to use the word godfatherism. I would want to use more the word alliances, because we've talked about alliance. And there's no doubt about it that alliances are formed not just within parties, but even in your workplace, even in your schools, and you form alliances, you have friendship groups and all those kind of things. So that is given. Now, does it lead to an equal opportunity for all? Well, alliances by definition therefore means that when alliance is stronger than another, then they may be able to push through their agenda. We've talked about this, that if you want to push through an agenda, you've got to ensure that you work hard to get your story across so that you can ensure that you get it done. So at the end of the day, it is actually about getting it done. And I think I understand what they're saying about godfatherism, but in a different guise, I would like to use the word alliance, really. But the outcome, if you like, or the intention behind the motive or the intention behind joining the party is actually going to be very critical. So if you know you have something to give, you don't necessarily need to fall into that godfatherism type of thing. But if you're going in there for a purpose, then you'll be looking for those who can actually help you get what you want what you want, and therefore you become subject to what they say. It's just life.
All right, Councillor Michael.
Councillor Biyi has been spot on. Really, is that at the core of it, it's the fact that it's the nature of just forming alliances itself. I don't think. I mean, the word itself has obviously godfatherism has kind of been tainted itself. It does happen in every political party. I say sometimes that when you get a position in a political party, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the best person. Couple of things come together that helps you get that position. It's most likely the alliances in which you form, some level of merit. Timing is absolutely important as well in that regard, so that all those factors will always determine what opportunity you get. There will be unequal opportunity. I've had people who have joined the Labour Party literally 4 or 5 years ago and have become Member of Parliament. I've had people who have been in the Labour Party for 20 years and have been trying to be Member of Parliament for a long time itself. So that there will be some level of unequal opportunity, but it's incumbent on you to understand the movement of kind of factors within the sphere of operation and trying to decide how you want that to play factor into your actions and into what you do. And it is correct that sometimes some allegiances are bad. So there will be some part of my parties that I would probably not want to kind of spend too much time associating with. There will be some part of my party that I would want to. There's some policies I champion. There's some policies which I challenge internally itself. So that would always be the case. But it's important that you don't allow the word itself to stop you. I think ultimately the Godfather themselves have got a vision, and they're trying to find people who is going to help them realize that vision.
Thank you, Michael. I think you literally, and that's where I really want to start. You see, the word Godfatherism is tainted, but the honest truth is that even in the private sector, you have sponsors, you have mentors, you have people that need to bring you into the room. People don't just get into the high rooms. People bring people into those rooms. And so the question I always say to people is, yes, they're good godfathers, they're bad godfathers, but are you a worthy godson? Are you a worthy person that people want to associate with and bring into their structure? If you're new, you're greenhorn, you get into a party, some people have spent years building structures, building systems, building influence. You cannot expect them to not exercise that level of influence at the level, admittedly, some for the wrong reasons and some for the right reasons. But the point is that you don't fight against what is, if you like, a fact. What you find a way to do is how you walk around it so that it is favorable to you. And this is the whole nature of politics. So for me, what I advise people is you yourself be valuable, be resourceful, add value, build those allegiances, as Councillor Oloko said. And then all of a sudden, you are obviously carefully selecting the type of person you want to associate with, make sure you have similar values. Then you get into the structure and then you work your way up. But there's no magic bullet that is going to chase godfathers away. They believe they earned it and they ought to be there. And you find it in the private sector. So just remember that. So rather than trying to hit your head against that, the question really is, how do we work around it and build allegiances with the right type of values that you share and that you want to see more of? All right, can we have the next question so that we can take it up from there? Right. How can young people find a platform to grow in politics? Maybe I could just put a spin to this question in the sense of what political party should I join, especially when you're looking at you are in more advanced democracies that when you hear Labour or like in America, the Democrats, it talks about the left-wing side. And when you hear about conservative or Republican, it talks about the right-wing side. So how can young people find a platform to grow in politics in a situation where ideologies are maybe not taking are very loose or very fluid?
I can perhaps start off. I think the first step is find your passion. So there are different areas that you'll be more interested in than the others. So I've generally kind of take particular interest in young people. I've taken interest in education, in housing, because I believe they're the key tenets to kind of putting structure to an individual at an early stage itself. So those areas I've particularly thought actually who can best kind of represent my thoughts, my views, my aspiration. So that's one. And that goes to the ideological question. But to be quite sincere with you, if you ask that only, you'll find yourself that actually there is a particular part of the Labour Party that can easily find itself, in my view, in the Conservative Party. And equally, there's probably a particular part of the Conservative Party that may find itself within the Labour Party itself, because parties sometimes can be quite broad. What you should also look at is kind of the method in which the approach in which the political parties take to achieve their aims and their interests itself. And I think if you combine both together, that should give you a guide as to perhaps which vehicle political parties should you get involved in order to take part. So for me, I mean, a lot of young people sometimes tend to join the smaller kind of the smaller parties at an early age, who are perhaps not being kind of burdened by the responsibilities of power, and can pretty much promise anything, and can pretty much say that that they would want to achieve this, they want to achieve that, without thinking about how they could actually achieve it in terms of the budget, in terms of practicalities, and everything else. But I would really encourage young people to think about the practicalities as well, about the fact that actually whatever idea you have, you've got to be able to resource it within the resources which are available within a system itself.
I think absolutely. It starts with the individual. You have to know what you want, or what you stand for, or where you want to go to. And it's only when you have that you can now decide which political party or which platform you want to anchor on. And I think so. My advice to young people is look inwards, understand what you want, what's driving you, why you want to do what you're doing, and then find the platform that can help you achieve that.
Agree.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we have just about 2 more questions we can take, so that we don't run out of time. How can political parties display some form of transparency to encourage us to join in? How can political parties display some form of transparency to encourage us to join in?
I'll probably suggest make it as cheap as possible. There was a time when the Labour Party made it £1 for young people to join. Obviously, the consequences of that may be that some parts of the party feel that they're not in control of membership. But I think make it financially affordable for young people to join and stay within the party. Offer additional financial support for regular engagement. I would say also offer skills support as well, so that as a councillor, and Councillor Biyi would attest to it, is that when you're a councillor, you can actually tap into a training budget. I don't use it often enough, where you can get skills development. So if you want to get training on public speaking, if you want to get training on mediating and other things, but that's only available when you're elected. There isn't the same level of in my own view, same budgetary support within political parties itself. And they do have generic training, but it's not the same. And I think political parties could do more in terms of that, in order to display some transparency to encourage people to join in.
All right.
And to add to that, I think the rules of engagement need to be very clear, which talks to communication and the way it is presented. You just need to understand what the party's values are, what they stand for, and what the rules of engagement and the different roles that are available to you when you come into a party. I think one of the things that, it's a common assumption that people join a political party because they want to aspire to office. But there are various routes or various ways to influence and shape. And like I said, there are about 17,000 councillors and about 650 MPs. So not everyone's going to get there. And some of these MPs, when they get in, they can be there for the next, some getting young and they leave very old. So in a particular area, you may never get the chance to be an MP. So does that mean that you don't want to be involved in politics? And I think that's one of the things that needs to be more transparent, in my view, is that the roles that are available to be played, the significance of those roles, and the contribution of those roles, so that people just don't think that it's just about office. It's really more than that. There's different roles in politics and in governance.
Wow. I did ask earlier on what we needed to learn, and I think this particular question has highlighted the key differences between what we are operating in many African countries and what the more advanced democracies are, practicing. It's more than the office. And yes, at the grassroots, yes, you do find a lot of people, involved at the grassroots level. But outside the grassroots, most of the other people, it's just about, they think politics, they think office, and how they can utilize that platform. But it's also interesting to note what Councillor Situ said about monthly dues. The only people that pay, as far as I'm aware, to the party are elected representatives. They actually take money out of their salaries towards the party. The average party member does not pay monthly dues, and that's why the parties are subject to certain individuals that come in as money bags and influence the entire party. If the parties were more inclined to taking, no matter how small, a little sum from every member as a contribution to the growth and advancement of the party, then you would have a situation where the party has financial muscle to negotiate things and hold its representatives accountable. And I think that is a major distinction of what we are practicing today, and perhaps what we did practice in the times of Oloko, and what is being practiced in Western democracies, where the party has its own financial muscle, can organize trainings, can organize several other things without depending on its elected representatives. And like you said, the parties have to let people know that it's much more than whether you want to go for office. Don't join one party just because of office. Join because you support what we're about and you want to make it move forward. So we're going to take our last question now. This is for Councillor Michael. How can political balance the need and perspective of younger members with that of older members?
I'm sure Councillor Biyi will have some thoughts about this. I'll be actually interested in hearing his thoughts. I think it's the party needs to recognize that it thrives well when it has a balance of input from different parts of society itself. It's got a disproportionately less membership of young people compared to other age group. And because of that, when it's at meetings, the majority tend to be the older age group itself. And that then feeds into elected office and feeds into other aspects. So that I think it's very important, whether it's there, making sure there's a minimum level of roles reserved for young people, or you create special forums, or you kind of have ways of ensuring that you evaluate on an annual basis or biannual basis how you are being inclusive to young people or how you're engaging young people. You need to find a way to strike that balance. My own view is that balance is not where it needs to be in most political parties in the UK. I'm pretty certain it's probably more dire in Nigeria and in other places itself.
Yes, that for me, that's $1 million question. Even as a DCP in my area, that's something that I have to really grapple with. But my short answer to that, and I like what Councillor Michael Situ said. But my short answer to that is that this is going to be about leadership. The leadership have to be intentional about making this happen. Because that is what needs to be done. There needs to be that balance between the younger members and the older members. And that's where the leadership kicks in. And the leadership has to be very intentional about it. And where the leadership is not intentional about it, nothing gets done. And where the leadership is intentional about it, of course, something gets done. I listened to some people the other day, and one of the things they talked about was, exactly this topic. How do we balance this? Because there's a lot of older members in the room. So one of my aspirations really is to widen that net, to make sure that we have younger members. And I really picked up some good ideas from Councillor Situ today, and things that need to get done. So maybe he can become an official consultant, but he probably won't be.
But we're all friends in UK.
But but I see that Councillor Shade Ado is on the line as well, so I'm sure we'll pick up from this and take from there. And I think there's not really much more you can say about that. That's the $1 million question. And the leadership needs to be intentional about it.
Wow, thank you. Could I just ask a follow-on question? I know we're wrapping up now, and I would love to know from both of you: does the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have, if you like, structured mentoring programs between the older members and the young? Are there structured programs whereby younger politicians can learn from older ones? And then maybe the second question to that is what do you do in the youth wing of the parties? What sort of programs happen in the youth wings of the party? I just out of interest as we start the roundup.
In the Labour Party, there isn't what would I say, organized countrywide mentoring program at all. There are patches around depending on whether one particular chairperson of a local party takes the initiative or not. And that's where the party can get better in having a national structure where you automatically almost kind of encourage it and you have it as a standing position by default, that there is that mentoring and support itself. I guess the also challenges finding mentors, because mentors themselves want to be mentees to other people, and it's finding time and balance in that way. There is slightly more structured support once you start taking up office, and that's just because you tend to drive that yourself. You tend to look for mentor, and you push yourself onto someone in that regards. So that I think certainly the Labour Party could do more in relation to this, and those circumstances within the party. I think the mentoring will probably, depending on, I suspect the cost is probably a major issue, which the National Party is looking at from that perspective. But I tell you this: if a member say to me as a chair, I'm not the chair of my local association, but if a member say to me, I want a mentor, can you find me a mentor? I will find them a mentor. And sometimes, in the absence of structured programs, if the individual shows initiative and show that they can devote the time, then there would be allowances made for them, and there will be people who are willing to rally round and provide those additional support.
Fantastic. Councillor Oloko?
In addition to that, I think, you've talked about the structure, which I totally agree with. But, one of the challenges of the structure is that it's been operated typically by volunteers, and you talk about time and availability of time. So it is incumbent on the individual to seek mentorship. I liken it to working in a company. You look for mentors, and we've talked about it earlier. Those who can pull you into the room, because you need somebody to help you get into the room. You need somebody to prepare you, to school you, to do all those things your mentees and your mentors and sponsors do. But this has been done within a volunteers-driven structure. And therefore, finding that balance is always going to be a challenge. There is some kind of framework, but where that framework is being operated primarily by volunteers, there's always going to be that challenge, what I call the push and pull for time and resources. But really, it's going to be down to the individual to ensure. And that comes back to what you said earlier, and I think Councillor Situ talked about it as well, that you need to be driven, you need to be focused, you need to look, you need to form alliances, and mentorship is part of the alliances that you form. And that's why you get things done. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting things done.
I agree.
Well, I think that's a good place to wind the conversation or bring the conversation to a close. On behalf of the African Governance Institute for Development, let me specially thank Councillor Biyi Oloko and Councillor Michael Situ for your time this evening, for your very, very enlightening views and bringing such a balance to the conversation we have had this evening. We really want to thank you for taking our time. I don't know if you have any final words, but really we just want to say thank you. And for everyone that has been part of this program, thank you for your time. A survey will be going out. Please do fill out the survey so that we can continue to learn how to serve you better and to know the sort of topics you want us to talk about. So please look out in your emails for the survey and please respond. So I'll just yield the floor for your final words, Councillor Situ and Councillor Oloko, just to, parting words, and then we'll close.
Can I just say this? We get involved in quite a lot of conversations, and sometimes you go away feeling that you've given more than you've taken. I must say that I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think in having conversations like this, you reflect. So I sat here reflecting myself, thinking, okay, to what extent am I adopting 100% or some of the things I'm saying myself? And I think that's really, really important for a speaker to think that actually they're getting something out of it. But it has been really a joy to speak with you all here today. It's been really a joy to be on the panelist with Councillor Biyi, and thank you very much, Seyi, for moderating us. It's been really, really enjoyable. The parting word which I will say is find your passion, get involved, and surround yourself with like-minded people. And the world is your oyster thereafter.
Thank you, Councillor Michael Situ. Councillor Oloko?
Well, there's not much to say about that. After that, I mean, that's exactly what it is. You've got to get involved. I mean, you've got to find your space and you've got to have the passion. But, again, I have learned. For me, this has also been a learning experience. So I've taken quite a bit from, the wise words that have come from Councillor Michael Situ today in terms of, the kind of programs to put in place for the youth as well, for us youth, because, we're talking about youth participation here. And really to thank you, Seyi, and the team for again putting on this event. And thank you that you invited me back. I hope that those who've been listening have been, they have been able to at least take something away. And the key thing that they should take away from this is that nothing's going to change. Physics, when they say physics, Newton's law of motion, everything is standstill until you apply a force to it. And it's the same thing. If you don't do nothing, nothing happens. So if you want to be involved, if you want to make a difference, and you're tired of all these things that I can see people are tired of, then please get involved.
All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Biyi Oloko. Thank you, Councillor Michael Situ. It has been a pleasure being with all of you this evening, this afternoon, this morning, wherever you're listening from. And until we'll meet again, please do follow, like, share African Governance Institute for Development. Until we'll see you in our next webinar in 2 weeks' time. Stay blessed.